Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining this program information session on the Columbia Business School Digital Business Leadership Program with Professor David Rogers. Before we start, I would just like to set some ground rules. If you have any questions, I would request you to please post them in Q&A so that we can manage those systematically. Thank you and it's really interesting to see a lot of you posting where you're joining from, and it seems we have quite a global audience attending this session today. So before I hand this over, I would like to welcome Professor David Rogers, who is the Program Faculty Director of the Digital Business Leadership Program. He is a member of the faculty at Columbia Business School and is a globally recognized leader on digital strategy. And he's known for his pioneering work on digital transformation. He's the author of 4 books, including his best-selling book, which is the Digital Transformation Playbook, Rethinking Your Business for the Digital Age. So we'll be spending around an hour 15 minutes on this webinar with Professor Rogers. And with that, I would like to hand this over to Professor Rogers.
Thanks very much, Gaurav. Just before we get started, AV check. How is my sound? Can you all hear me?
Perfect, David, loud and clear.
Terrific. And you can see the slide deck, which I just started sharing?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, folks. We've got a large and still growing live audience here today joining us for the webinar from all over the world. As I've seen, many wonderful places I saw mentioned in the chat where I've had the pleasure to visit during times when visiting was easier, so which I visited virtually in the last 12 months, and others that I look forward to returning to when travel resumes, hopefully before too long. So I'm really happy to have this time to be able to talk with you a bit today about our digital business leadership program, which I direct for Columbia Business School, talk about our next run and how we have designed this one to create the most impactful educational experience possible for you, the incredible global audience of executives and entrepreneurs and learners who we bring together, and take some questions at the end. A little bit about myself and my background, so you know sort of where I'm coming from to this topic. So I teach at Columbia Business School. I've been at the business school for over 20 years, actually. And my teaching for the last decade or more has been focused specifically on our executive programs. That's really been what I am drawn to and find most exciting, is to engage with working executives, mid-career, people who are in positions of influence and impact, who are stepping into new roles, taking on new challenges, and really bringing to the classroom, so to speak, not a sort of an initial, let me get my foundation for my career, but a set of questions and opportunities and looking to sort of take themselves to the next stage in their career and drive the next stage of growth for their organizations. My own work is focused on the intersection of the digital era, the digital economy and world and technology and business and organizations, focusing on digital strategy, customer behaviors and marketing, leadership, and more. I also have directed, we've had 10 of the Google CMO Academies, a partnership between Google and Columbia over the years. I launched our Bright conference at Columbia, founded that about a dozen years ago. We're getting ready for the next annual version of that. When I'm not teaching or organizing events with Columbia, I'm very often writing, doing a lot of that this year. And that takes the form of books. I've written 4 books and research studies. And my goal is very much to be always focused on what are the questions that are of most practical importance to business leaders today? And how can we bring a thoughtful and analytic approach to understanding and deepening our sort of skill set around them. So research on topics that hopefully don't sound too academic, things like how do consumers use mobile devices in physical retail spaces to bring together an omni-channel experience? How do we design business models around the Internet of Things. Recent study that I just completed on the impact of COVID and the economy from the last year and looking forward upon digital transformation efforts in a variety of global organizations. So very much being sort of that practical focus to the writing. And when I'm not teaching and when I'm not writing, I try to spend the balance of my time following the advice of my friend Steve Blank, who always urges entrepreneurs to get out of the building, which means stop sitting in your conference room or your coffee shop with your Post-it notes, talking to each other about your brilliant idea. Get out there and spend time with customers in the real world. So for me, that means spending even before this year, spending as little time as possible on campus, as much time as possible actually out in the world, interacting with, speaking to, advising, consulting, and working with a wide range of companies. And really that's sort of my guiding kind of focus, is as wide a range as possible, looking at diverse industries, different size organizations, different age organizations, different parts of the world, and really trying to understand what are the patterns across these. What are the common challenges that we see today in technology companies like a Google and HP or Cisco, with as well as a luxury goods company like a Cartier or Pernod Ricard, industrial companies like United Technologies, financial services companies, telcos, retails, automotive. What do these companies have in common? What are the similar challenges that they're all facing? And how can we devise new frameworks for strategy and leadership that will be applicable and useful across these very different kinds of organizations? That's really the sort of big question that drives my work with companies and in the classroom and research and beyond. And over the last several years, that sort of quest has led me more and more to the topic of digital transformation. I actually wrote the first book on the topic. There have been many, many, many more since then. And it has continued to grow in importance to more and more organizations since my book came out. It's now in 11 languages, with actually a couple more on the way this year. Spanish and Romanian will be next. We just put out Japanese last month. So clearly a topic of global interest and enduring interest. Now, we've just been through a very unusual 12 months and are probably looking ahead to another differently very unusual 12 months in terms of the business landscape. So pretty much every time I speak now, the first question that I get is, in the sense, how does this context affect the work, the questions, the challenges you've been looking at around digital leadership? And I would say that the biggest change is that there's no longer any room for inertia, complacency, delays, and sort of hemming and hawing of whether we really need to take this digital thing that seriously, whether we can maybe put it off for a little bit longer and follow someone else's lead. So this was a cartoon from Tom Fishburne that I particularly appreciated last year to sort of capture the sense of the complacent or resistant boardroom facing the wrecking ball of the COVID pandemic, it forcing us to reckon with the digital era that is so clearly upon us. And in fact, the top takeaway, if I was to pull out one from the research study that just published with HCL, the technology services global firm, on digital acceleration or business resilience, that was the name of the study. The top takeaway is that what I've seen is this leveling of urgency across industries. There used to be a huge gap between industries like media, for example, and technology services companies versus some other industries. Probably particularly low on the list would be sort of manufacturing, energy sector, et cetera. And the level of urgency the gap has dramatically narrowed. Basically, everyone recognizes now that digital transformation is no longer a question of if, but really a question of how fast can we do this? It's not if we're going to do this or whether we should, but how do we do it faster? How do we pick up the pace, because there's such an urgency for it? I see a couple hands raised. Just to reiterate, as Gaurav mentioned, if you can put your questions in the Q&A box, and he's going to be curating them, and we will take them as we go through the agenda. We're going to cover a lot, or I'm going to cover a lot up front in a sort of condensed format, which will probably answer about 80% of your questions. But by the end, I'm sure there'll still be a good number more that I haven't covered with this sort of speed agenda. But what I want to talk about is, first of all, the impetus. What is the point or the sort of imperative or goal of this program on digital leadership? Then give an overview of the program, talk a little bit about the faculty, I'll walk you quickly through the sort of curriculum and calendar, because there's a lot of different sort of moving pieces, and to understand not just what the pieces are, but to sort of see how they sort of build on each other to give you a real sense of how this program works. We'll talk a little bit about the kinds of participants we have in this program, your wonderful alumni benefits, admissions process, and we'll go to the Q&A and leave some time for all your remaining questions. All right. So first of all, let's start with a big question. Why do we need a program on digital business leadership, right? Why not just a program on business or on leadership? This program is really focused, I would say, in particular on the importance today for any organization in any industry of two different but related challenges. And so the first challenge we may call digital innovation. And this is the challenge of how do you build the next Uber, if you will, or the next Airbnb, or the next Robinhood. How do you look at the environment around you, look at emerging and evolving customer needs and problems and opportunities, look at competitive environment, what is offered, look at new emerging technologies, new capabilities, things which can be done today, which perhaps couldn't have been done yesterday, and identify that white space. How do you guide your quest for that repeatable, scalable, profitable business model, which is the heart of new innovation, right? How do you do that in a methodical fashion to create new growth, new ventures, new innovations, new opportunities? The second challenge is what I would call digital transformation. And that is the question, not of how do you build a new business from scratch in that new white space opportunity you hopefully identify, but rather how do you take an existing organization that already has products, services, customers, distribution, partners, supply chain, a brand, data sets in its CRM, has employees, financial resources, so many things in place. Now, many of these things are or should be and can be advantages. If you're an established business, clearly you've done something right. Clearly you have customers, or you wouldn't be in business, after 20 or 50 or 120 years, looking at a company, such as Ford Motors. And yet at the same time, all of these things you have in place, the resources, the assets, the equipment, the people, the skill sets, the organizational chart, the structures, the processes, all of these things can also become impediments to change, impediments to innovation, and create a sort of inertia that becomes increasingly problematic in a digital economy where the pace of change, and hence the pace of innovation and adaptation that is required of us, seems to be getting faster and faster. And so the challenge of digital transformation is, how does an organization that actually grew to scale before the digital era, how does it need to transform itself? How does it change? How does it change sufficiently in a way in order to reach its next stage of growth, right, in this digital environment? Now, when you hear people talking about digital transformation, very often you'll see the second sentence of the blog post or the interview or whatever immediately starts launching into a discussion of technologies. And certainly there are a lot of technologies that are happening around us, that are taking hold, that are shaping the business environment, that are being adopted by customers, and it's important to understand them. But, I was looking at a very recently published book on digital transformation. And in the first page, it was sort of capturing the landscape with, I believe the acronym they had was SMACIT, SMACIT. Now, let's see if I can remember. Social, S is social media, right? Cool. I can remember that. That's pretty straightforward. Then M was, I think it was mobile computing, or maybe it was actually modular architecture, the whole movement from sort of monolithic IT architecture to the sort of Amazon Web Services style, modular architecture. The A is clearly artificial intelligence, right? Or is it APIs? Maybe it's APIs. Actually, maybe it's augmented reality. Or perhaps it's autonomous vehicles, drones and the cars that Tesla is building and so forth. The C could be cloud, of course. It's got to be cloud unless it's cryptocurrency, or perhaps it's CRISPR, the technology that's going to probably bring as much change to biological sciences in the next 20 years as in the last 2000. Maybe it's Clubhouse, right? The IT is clear. That's information technology, unless it's Internet of Things, of course. I'm not sure where 5G fits in here, or edge computing. Surely we should add some more letters, quantum computing. So clearly the first challenge with starting with a technology first sort of approach to thinking about all this is, where do you draw the line? And the technologies are never ending, and each one that really matters is essentially catalyzing the next one right on its heels. So while we will talk about technology in this program, what I want to be clear is it is not the focus. This is not a book that starts with the first page listing a bunch of technologies. We are going to focus much less on what the technologies are and much more on how and why technologies come to matter to your business, to customers, to the environment, looking at historical patterns. And more importantly, we will start with the perhaps provocative assertion that digital transformation is actually not about technology, right? It is not, obviously you have to understand what's going on with technology. Obviously it is shaped by the adoption and usage of technologies in markets and customers and the capabilities that they bring. But fundamentally, the heart of taking that organization that, again, grew to scale and established itself and its whole business model and operating model before the digital era, and now must change despite all that inertia in order to continue to grow. The hardest part about that is not about the technologies you're going to implement, not at all, right? They're not trivial, but they are not the key. The key is really, it's about strategy, it's about leadership, and it's about new ways of thinking inside your organization, really at every level. So what we will instead start with, rather than a list of technologies, is what I call the 5 domains of digital transformation. And this is a strategic framework which I developed in my book, the Digital Transformation Playbook, and which we will use as sort of a guiding framework to look at a lot of different critical issues in the course of this program. Some from my own lectures, also other speakers who I bring in and faculty and so forth. But we will be focusing on each of these 5 domains. And the point is, how do we learn as business leaders to think differently about our customers, to think differently about competition, to think differently about the role of data in our business, to think differently about innovation, and to think differently about our own value, our value proposition as a business in the digital era. So I'll say just a few words on each of these 5 to give you a sense, what do we mean by these domains and what kind of issues and topics may come up in each of them. So when we talk about customers, this is fundamentally a shift that we are making from thinking about customers, as we taught for years and years in business schools, as targets. Basically, the marketing paradigm and the customer strategy paradigm of the 20th century was all about identifying, targeting, and reaching or addressing customers in an efficient way, hitting them with the right message at the right moment in the right time. And instead of thinking of your customers as targets who you will reach with an outbound message and delivery of product at scale and so forth, to instead see them as a network, an interconnected network of nodes of your current customers, your potential customers, other customers who are influencing them, who are all connected to so many sources of information and exchange and value creation. And you have to think about, how do you enter into this network and play an active dynamic role that you are providing for the customer, and also learning from and gaining from the customer, and leveraging and encouraging them, catalyzing them to act in ways that actually help to grow your business. The second domain, competition, has to be dramatically rethought from the way we have taught it for decades in business schools. So all of our traditional models of competition, the 5 forces, from Michael Porter and others, were based around the industry as unit of analysis. And as a result, competition was seen as pretty much a zero-sum game. For me to win, you had to lose. There was a very clear definition of who was a competitor versus who was a partner. Industry was sort of the lens for everything. Now, all of that in the digital era is gone. None of those models work. We have to start with the understanding that industries are themselves incredibly fluid, and we are moving across and competing across in between them. As a result, we need to be able to both compete and cooperate with the very same businesses at the same time. We have to deal with both symmetric and asymmetric competitors. Instead of competing solely on the products that we bring to market, we have to look at the impact of platforms, where a single company has a multi-sided business model that brings together value. Really what they're doing is they are facilitating an exchange of value. That's how they win in the marketplace, not by creating the value all themselves and sort of out-delivering somebody else who has the same business model as you. When we think about data, data is a tricky subject, because we often act as if it's something totally new, but data has been part of how we've run businesses from the beginning. What is subtly different is the role that data plays in every organization. And so traditionally, in the analog era, if you will, data was critical, but data was used as a management tool. It was used to better understand, measure, and manage our current operations and business. And as a result, in order to fulfill that mission effectively, data tended to sit within silos. So you want to have the data close to each functional unit. And so the marketing team would have certain marketing data, the sales team has its own data sets, HR has employee data. And so you had all these sort of siloed pockets of data in order to use them to manage effectively different parts of the business. What has changed in the digital era, as the capabilities around data and the availability of data have both changed dramatically, is the opportunity now is to actually bring all of these silos together, if we can overcome the hurdles to doing so, to integrate the data inside and outside our organization, and to then use that data not just to operate our current business, but to build our next business. The data actually becomes a source of new value creation. It is one of the most important intangible assets of any organization. The fourth domain I mentioned is innovation. So we need to rethink our approach to innovation, and particularly how do we manage the risks of innovation in the digital era. So the traditional approach to managing risk in innovation, because innovation is inherently risky, right? The whole point of innovation is you're doing something that is new, at least to your business, your organization. So you are much less certain what the outcomes will be. Now, the approach we taught for decades in business schools was that you dealt with that uncertainty through business planning, right? You would do very detailed planning. You write a long, detailed business plan about this new product or new business model you're going to launch that's never been done before, in which you spell out what's going to happen in the first year, and the second year, and the third year, and the financial projections, and how many people are going to buy, and so forth. All really pretty much pure fiction. And basically, innovation was run as a series of very high-stakes gambles. Sometimes that pays off, sometimes it doesn't. What's happened in the digital era is the pace of change has picked up so fast that organizations simply cannot sustain that approach anymore. You can't take the risk of these huge failures in the market and hope that another huge win will offset it, because there's simply too many new dramatic risks and uncertainties you have to try to address every single year, every single quarter. And so we are seeing a dramatic shift to a whole different approach to innovation, which we see coming out of a series of streams of thinking, what I call the four religions of innovation in the digital era: lean startup, agile software development, design thinking, and product management. All of these are basically around dealing with uncertainty by managing innovation as a process of rapid iterative experimentation. So that's a big theme we'll be looking at in class. And lastly, the fifth domain, which is value. How do you define your own value proposition, your value to the market? Why does your business exist? Now, traditionally, we answered this question by turning to our industry. That was what told you what your value proposition was. So if you are a newspaper company, what do you here on this world to do? What's your value proposition? Well, we deliver the news on paper, right? That was pretty straightforward. And you didn't really have to think about it very much. Every day, instead, you would focus on having the best editors and the best reporters to get out there and identify the most important news of the day and break it for someone else and get the additional information and so forth. But the sort of fundamental, what are we here for? What's the value we offer, was something you could, again, just take for granted based on what it had been in the past. That is simply not the case in the digital era. Every business that is surviving and thriving today is constantly rethinking and asking itself, what business am I really in? What needs am I really here serving? And which of the needs that I served for the last 10 years are maybe not as pressing anymore? Or the customer has now found another means to addressing them? What are the new needs that customers are facing? What's the emerging opportunities to create value for the market, which I couldn't have done before, but now I can? So constantly taking this sort of evolutionary approach to adapting and rethinking what is your value to the market. That's the fifth domain. All right, so just sort of a broad brush view of where we think about some of the big questions that this entire program is focusing on. And again, as I said, this framework comes from the book, the Digital Transformation Playbook, where there's a lot of specific tools, strategic planning tools, and other concepts related to them. But these are also domains in which we bring in a lot of other speakers, thinkers, faculty, industry guest speakers, and so forth to help us dive into each of them. So let me talk about the big questions behind this program. What are we seeking to explore and address and really bring to bear? Let me give a quick sort of overview of how the program works, because this is a really unique program. I've been teaching online for many years at Columbia Business School and in the classroom as well, in a face-to-face. Digital Business Leadership Program was launched with our very first cohort as a hybrid program, very intentionally to bring together the mix and the best of each, the in-person and the remote. And it has evolved each time we've run the program. This year, obviously, it's going to evolve a little bit more because we're sort of optimizing it around the constraints and opportunities of the current moment. But it's still following in that spirit of really taking what we have learned from each previous run of the program and how to optimize this sort of hybrid model of learning for these kind of active, highly informed and experienced and deeply questioning participants who are the students in this program. So big picture, this is, we are launching in April and running through October. So it's a 6-month span. The learning framework, so to speak, involves a few key pieces. We have what we call our live online classroom. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this is synchronous. Like this, we're all in the space at the same time, and much more interactive than this webinar, where I'm sort of doing a big information dump at the front, and then we'll do questions at the end. We also have what we call online modules, not live. And just to be clear, these, as we'll get into, these are on demand. So this is not synchronous. These are elements that you access whenever you want on your own sort of schedule. Independent work, both individually and in teams. There's a big focus on experiential learning, as we'll talk about, in terms of a team project, a personal case, and industry speakers. And there's also a very important in-person immersion module, which will be happening in October in New York City on Columbia University's campus. The tuition you're aware of, and as you know, this has been reduced to reflect that the in order to run the program that'll work for everyone, we've tilted a bit less in person, a bit more of the live online, and actually the same amount of the on demand as we had in the past. All right, so as we've designed this program, the focus has really been on you. And speaking of value propositions, what is the benefit to the learner of this program? And what we've seen is there's 7 key elements to this. First, this is a program designed to help you develop your own leadership abilities to drive digital transformation in your own organizations. Second, the opportunity to learn from Columbia Business School faculty who are world-renowned experts in their fields. I'll talk a bit about faculty as we get through this. Third, to be able to examine disruptive business models and learn from leading industry practitioners. And these are folks from Silicon Valley, they're from New York City and beyond. And this is one of the great things about the live online classroom is it allows us to actually expand the industry speakers from who we've had in the past, amazing companies in Silicon Valley and New York. Now we've had companies like, the chief transformation officer for Ford Motors, who was in Detroit, never would have been able to get to teach and speak in the class. Amazing session with our last cohort. We will be, fourth, really important element, not just learning about lean, rapid, iterative innovation, but actually applying the principles to a real world business challenge through working, everyone will be working in a team project, working on a real business guided by our faculty. Developing a leadership plan for driving digital transformation in your own organization through a personal case, which will be guided by tools and frameworks provided to you. The whole program is designed to minimize, sorry for the typo, and really sort of work within your other competing demands, because people in this program have a lot of work responsibilities. It is designed to be a flexible structure throughout this, as we call it, our 6-month Ivy League learning journey, but in a way that, life does not have to stop. The whole point is to be balancing this with your career and work. It should be feeding into and supporting and energizing that work as you're in the program, not just after it's over, and drawing on the experiences and questions and challenges you are facing in your work, bringing that into the classroom as well. And lastly, and this is really important to folks, the opportunity, because of the scope of this program, you will actually, if you complete it and all the requirements, you will graduate with alumni benefits and join us as a member of the alumni of Columbia Business School, which brings with it a lot of global networking opportunities. All right, so those are the sort of key 7 pillars, we would say. Now about the curriculum. Really, we have a lot of topics that we cover in the course of this program, but as I think about them, as I've designed the program and sort of evolved it over time, I really think about it as fitting in within sort of 3 broad areas. We have a lot of focus on different elements of digital strategy. So these are things like the 5 domains model. These are things like really understanding platforms, competition, and those multi-sided business models I talked about before. Thinking about and understanding the behaviors of customer networks, understanding asymmetric competition and disruptive business models and the difference between them, looking at how do we leverage data and artificial intelligence for competitive advantage, et cetera. We also have a deep focus in many different ways on the topic of rapid innovation. So what do we mean by innovating through experimentation? Understanding concepts like A/B testing, MVPs, convergent and divergent experimentation, doing a deep dive in particular into the lean startup method, also known as the customer development method, understanding how it works, where it comes from, and how you use that to identify, test, and validate new businesses under great uncertainty. I'll be introducing my own model, which builds upon that, called the 4 stages of business model validation, with a tool to guide you through that process. We'll be looking at these sort of foundational theories, lean, agile, design thinking, and product management, how they all fit together, as well as looking at tools like the problem opportunity matrix and how we use them to really link strategy and innovation. And this is a key difference between the enterprise innovation versus standalone startups is within an enterprise, you have to think about is you've got different teams that are sort of each acting like perhaps startups, if you will. How do you link that to both the overall strategy of the enterprise, the business, and also the as they grow and succeed and scale into the ongoing operations of the business? Which brings us to the third bucket, if you will, which is really, we'll be looking throughout the program at the topic of organizational transformation. What are the barriers? What are the reasons why we see so many reports of struggle and failure, frankly, and frustration or disappointing results from companies' efforts at digital transformation? How do we define a unique and compelling case for change in a given organization? The importance of doing so. How do we scale innovations and new ideas and digital ventures for real impact within established enterprises, which is very different than how do you scale a standalone startup? How do we manage in parallel? This is one of the key ideas that I've been focusing on in my own work in recent years, is the idea of not moving from one old management model to one cool new management model where, okay, we used to use Six Sigma and all wear suits, and now we all wear torn jeans and use Post-it notes and play foosball. Really what large organizations need is a mix of different management models that are being used to address different problems and opportunities with greater and lesser uncertainty for the organization. One of the tools I use to sort of help address this big question is what I call the 3 paths to growth, and understanding how you need to actually pursue all 3 paths in parallel, but each one needs a different approach to management. We'll talk about culture, the importance of culture, what culture really means inside organizations. It's not just a bunch of fuzzy words. It's actually about driving behavior in very specific ways. And how do leaders shape culture in order to make those changes in behavior happen? And lastly, how do you think about in an iterative change-focused approach to transformation? How do you think about sort of a roadmap of where you're starting from, where you're seeking to go, and how do you effectively drive change in an established, large, complex organization? And some of the lessons we can see from those who have done it successfully and those who have struggled. So those are sort of the big topics. But this is not addressed in simply a matter of, it's not only addressed in readings and lectures and speakers. It is very much designed, in this program in particular, of all the programs I teach, is designed to be highly experiential. So I like to turn to this quote from Xunzi, the ancient Chinese philosopher, which translates roughly as, I hear and I forget, I see, I remember, I do, and I understand. So that's our goal, to not just hear, not just see, but to actually do, to apply these ideas and in applying them to greatly deepen our understanding of them. So one of the ways we do this is with these team projects. So this is a lean startup project. So this is an innovation project. Everyone is going to work in a team on a real world innovation project. These are all submitted by you, by the participants. You don't have to submit, but many students submit an idea, and then we have a process where you pitch them to each other, and those teams which attract the most, those ideas which attract most interest, we form into teams. And that's how the teams are created. And these are, again, real world business ideas. In some cases, it's an idea for a new standalone business. In other cases, it's an idea for an innovation that, if it succeeds, will be developed by an existing organization, by where the person who pitched it works. You're going to be not just learning about, but applying the lean startup methodology that are used by startups to rapidly test and innovate around new ideas. You'll be conducting customer interviews, doing field work, all about validating, testing, and innovating rapidly to find a business model that works. This is all about putting theory into practice. So this is a lot of teamwork that goes throughout the entire program. It has always been a mix of teams who are working remotely at times within the program using technologies like Zoom, and meeting in person and working collaboratively in person. The balance is going to be a little bit different in this cohort, but this has always been the case. The only real difference is week 1 of the class, when I say I highly recommend that all the teams that have been formed, you should really try out Zoom. It's a really good tool for meeting each other. I will not have people ask the question, excuse me, Professor Rogers, what is Zoom? That's what I always heard in the past. Working together, but also getting out of the building, talking to customers. And this is, again, a mix of, doing so through phone and video conferencing, interviews and so forth. And, as permissible and feasible and when, face to face. And we'll hope there'll be more of that sooner than later. But business does not stop, has not stopped in the last year, and neither has business growth. We've actually seen an increase in new startups and entrepreneurship in the last 12 months. You have to get out there and talk to the customer, and you're going to take every means necessary, because that is the only way you can build a business. So those are the team projects done as a team. There's another really important piece, which is individual. Now, this is the personal case in which you focus on building a plan for digital transformation in your own firm. This one is optional, in part because some people are not currently at a organization. For example, we have some people who are their current job is they're leading a small startup. So their challenge is not how do you drive an organizational change plan for a large, complex organization, which is what this personal case is designed around. Others may be in that situation and they want to apply and use these frameworks, but it's too confidential. They're not able to share it with anyone else. And so you have the option to also do this just sort of privately. But the focus is on your own firm. The goal is to develop a draft roadmap for digital transformation in your own organization. We'll have a guided methodology. I'll be providing you with a set of tools and steps and frameworks and things to examine. This is work that you will be doing individually during the remote and the online modules. And then you will be both assigned for peer mentoring. So you'll be in groups of 3 in which you will be continuing to meet back with those same peers and show them your progress, which you're thinking through on your roadmap, providing input, feedback, questions to them on theirs. And we'll also have group debriefs, which I will lead during the live online classroom, where we talk about what we've seen, what I've seen across some of the different personal cases and what are the sort of issues and challenges that have surfaced as you work through this process. All right, a little bit about the faculty. As mentioned at the top, I am the faculty director. So that basically means that I am doing 100% of the program design. Everything that is in this program is there because I made the decision to include it. So I'll take the heat for any parts that maybe you feel don't belong, but I'll just say there's a reason for, and maybe sometimes the reason isn't clear until a little later in the program, but hopefully it's all pretty clear as we go. So I designed the whole program. I do the most teaching, but I probably am teaching about 40% of the classroom time in the program. So we have a lot of other faculty as well. But I am with you every day. So every day of the classroom, whether it's an in-person on campus, whether it's the live online classroom, I will be there each day and be that sort of guiding thread each day, kicking things off, reflecting back on what we talked about or who we heard from the day before, linking together all the different themes and work. We have fantastic faculty from Columbia Business School who I just adore and love to bring into this program. It varies a little bit each time we do it, but among some of the terrific faculty we typically have, Rita McGrath, a world-renowned strategist and an author on innovation and strategy in large companies. She is one of our, great teachers who I always have in this program. Oded Netzer is an incredible expert on data-driven organization. So this is another key element of organizational change, is how do you not just apply, develop, get the data that you need, so to speak, in your organization, but how do you actually change the way people think? How do you change the way, not the technologists, not the data scientists, but the average manager in every team at each level of the organization, to get them to actually adopt data-driven thinking. And this is something I'm going to bring up, but Oded brings a tremendous focus on it. So one of our terrific executive faculty. We've had Todd Jick several times, who's a leading expert on organizational change and culture, fantastic teacher. Miklos Sarvari, who's the co-director of our media and technology program, bringing deep insights from the B2B world, but particularly from the media world, which is really the industry that they got hit earliest and hardest by the disruptive force of the digital economy. Fantastic teacher. We've had others. Bob Bontempo spoke with us last cohort about how do leaders lead change through persuasion of others when you can't lead through authority. We've got some other fantastic faculty who I'm looking to bring. We had Sri Srinivasan previously. So we'll have several really interesting folks from the Columbia Business School faculty over the course of the program. We have two also in particular, sort of a different key role is our lean startup faculty. And we will have, again, returning with us, Bob Dorff and Jeremy Kagan, both coaches who will be working with the lean startup teams throughout their projects, giving them that outside coaching view on what they're doing and discovering as they push forward their business idea. Jeremy is an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship, former managing director of the Lang Center, an author on digital marketing and corporate accelerators. Bob Dorff is really one of the leading lights of the topic of lean startup and this whole approach to innovation. He co-authored the seminal book, The Startup Owner's Manual, with Steve Blank. And so a tremendous thinker and figure in sort of laying some of the foundational thinking in Silicon Valley on this topic. So, so Bob and Jeremy, you'll be in very good hands coaching through it. And Bob will also be giving some lectures explaining that sort of fundamental thinking and the sort of the history of lean startup. In addition to our faculty, we will have industry speakers. And this is really fun for me each time we run DBLP, for me to get to reach out to and try to find an interesting new and different mix. We've had speakers like Vanessa Colella, pictured here, Chief Innovation Officer at Citi, Marcy Cleavorn, who I mentioned from Ford, David Glick, who was an executive for 20 years at Amazon, Imran Haq from Pfizer and Zoetis, Walmart, United Technologies, Google, Microsoft, IDEO, et cetera. These are just some of the kinds of companies who we've had in the past. The key thing here is the kinds of perspectives that I try to bring into this program, and it is intentionally a mix. It is not just one thing. So I find it very valuable to bring in executives who have been leading digital at these legacy firms, at these traditional companies. Again, someone like Vanessa Colella or Vala Vakili from Citibank, for example. Also, people who work or have worked in some of those big technology firms like the Googles and the Amazons and of the world. But also, and this is particularly relevant to the work you're going to be doing in your teams, hearing from early stage startups and growth stage startups, people who are dealing with the latest emerging technologies, finding new business models that we're not yet familiar with and haven't been using for 10 years, like a search engine. Hearing from the venture capital perspective, investors, they have a very particular perspective on thinking about how do you see the landscape of change and identify what you want to invest in. And innovation experts, companies like IDEO, Optimizely, and so forth are often another type that I'll try to bring in a speaker from. All right, I'm getting close to the time I want to wrap this up. So very briefly, I'll just walk through the calendar. And you should have this already in writing from the brochure, so I'll do this quickly. Basically, we kick off with this sort of a pre-programmed session in which we sort of lay out the requirements and the mechanics of the class, get you guys all set up in the virtual space so that you're going to be able to share files, have everything to go. When we start the first day of teaching, nobody's saying, wait, I can't find the slides, or I'm having trouble seeing this, getting all that kind of housework in order, introducing ourselves, and also explaining how to submit your idea, if you have one, for a team project, right? So then you'll have a couple weeks to put in those final submissions. And then April 27th, we kick off with the big module 1. So that's over 2 weeks. We'll have 8 days where we have each day 180-minute session. This is this interactive virtual sessions with the faculty. We also, during module 1, kick off the team project. So you will pitch the ideas. People will respond, ask questions, vote on the ideas that interest them. Teams will be formed. Teams will start working. You'll be getting out there, talking to customers. All this happens in module 1. So there's a big rapid start out the gate on the team projects. Then module 2 is one of our online, meaning on-demand modules. You're going to have a series of content on digital marketing based on my own online course on the topic. You'll also be working with those team projects. So doing a lot of work now in this remote fashion together with your team, and we'll, again, with coaching from your coaches as you go through module 2. Then we are back together in the live online classroom in June for module 3. This will be 4 days over a week of, again, interactive sessions. This is faculty, myself, and others, industry speakers, and so forth. And also continuing to work, we'll have a check-in with your team projects. You'll be presenting them to the coaches and to me and getting feedback on every single team. Then we're back to module 4, which is pretty similar to module 2. Again, you're on your own. On-demand content, rounding out the rest of the topics on digital marketing strategies, and again, continuing to push forward your team projects, working in the field with customers, developing your business model, coaching from your coaches. Module 5, we have our third session where we are in the live virtual classroom. This will be, again, 1 week, 4 days, more speakers, more industry speakers, more faculty, another check-in on the projects, and really sort of orienting each team for their final stretch. So getting final feedback from myself and your coaches on your last push, your last sort of sprint, if you will, of the team projects. I should also say module 5 and 3, we're also doing that group debrief on the personal case that you've been working on your own as well. Module 6 is our last online independent module. The online class elements is actually from another class. This is on leadership with Adam Galinsky and Kathy Phillips, really one of our some of our top rated faculty in the whole school, really a terrific program. And you will also be, again, this is your last sprint of the team projects, doing your final work, getting out there, really pushing forward as much learning and evolution of your new businesses as you can with the team coaching. And then lastly, we wind up in October with module 7. This is live and it is in person. So we will be for 6 days, an elongated week, in person in New York City on the campus of Columbia University. And we'll be hearing from a range of faculty, probably some additional practitioners, but really a chance to be in the classroom face-to-face with myself, with Bob and Jeremy, and with some of the other great faculty who I mentioned earlier. In terms of the projects, this will be, you're all done. This is your final presentations and voting for, there's a class vote for the best project of them all. So it's a point of pride for the winners with each cohort. We'll have a final chance to meet with some industry experts, and we will have a celebratory graduation dinner. All right. So just a few last points, just to clarify, again, before we go to questions, the live online classroom, what this means, this is live teaching with faculty. Everyone is on with live audio and video. We will be seeing each other's, video feeds in the gallery sort of mode. It is highly interactive. We'll be doing breakout discussions, class Q&As, whiteboard collaboration, et cetera. These are done. We've found that really the sort of 180 minutes or sort of 3 hours is kind of the peak amount of intense engagement we can do with a usually like a short 5-minute break in the middle. And we're tentatively going to start approximately 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll finalize that within half an hour or so before we launch the class, but just to give you a sense of the approximate time frame. What we call the online modules, those are the on-demand modules. Again, this is on your own schedule. You'll have many video lectures, you'll have assignments, you'll have, there's digital simulations for the digital marketing part, where you can test out, do a simulated advertising campaign with different, search versus social and so forth, and play around with parameters and see what kind of data you get. 2 topics, again, the digital marketing in the first 2 modules, and then the leadership with Adam Galinsky and Kathy Phillips in the third of these modules. Maybe I should have led with this. In some ways, the most important part of the whole program is the participants, you guys, an incredible group every time that we have done this program, a little different each time, but really very common threads through all of them. Participants in DBLP come from large, medium sized, actually some of and some, entrepreneurs. We had a founder of an amazing startup in our last cohort where she's, still a small business, leading business providing live streaming of Broadway theater shows and similar theater from, London and elsewhere, online streaming. Now, a year and a half ago, when she entered the class and talked about that, it was sort of like, what a neat idea. That should be bigger. Of course, they've had a huge boost this year. But although we have some entrepreneurs, most folks are at large and mid-sized firms in all different industries, a minimum of 10 years experience, international exposure, urgent agenda for digital transformation, and real fluency in written and spoken English. The program is very designed, this is critically important to me, to facilitate and to catalyze peer learning. And there's every single step of the way, we look at not just how do we create an opportunity to present you with information, to design things for you, but to design circumstances where you are going to learn from each other in many different ways. The team projects, the peer mentoring on the personal case, breakout discussions and exercises, many different things we do. And as Angelo, among just many, many participants in this program have said, that really winds up being one of the most important parts of the whole program, is this incredible cohort who you get to know so well and learn so much from, because everyone comes to this program with years and years of business experience in many different roles and real expertise and knowledge and insights and their own leadership lessons that are germane to all of these topics. People come from wide range of different industries. This is just an example of some of the sorts of roles and titles that they've had and the functions they've worked in. 20 years experience is the average amount of work experience for folks in this program. Your industry, whatever it is, I guarantee pretty much we've had somebody from it. You can see it's kind of a bit of everything. The biggest category on this chart is other. So really a diverse range of industries. And wherever you're from, we probably have somebody who's, if not from your country itself, from someplace nearby, who's in our alumni cohort. Our biggest single city represented over the years has been New York, but our second is Singapore. We've got people from all over the world and all 6 continents at this point. And lastly, I mentioned this up front, but just a little bit on the alumni benefits. So as I said, one of the great things about this program is that you become an alumni of Columbia Business School. At the end of it, that's something you have for life. It gives you access to our career services department, which helps alumni with their own, career steps wherever they are in their journey. You are invited to alumni events and programs around the world. You can join an alumni club. Columbia Business School has alumni clubs in cities and countries around the world. We've had many DBLP alumni who join, who even become officers or become involved in leading their local alumni club. A tuition benefit for other executive education programs, global networking opportunities, a lifetime business school, Columbia Business School email forwarding address, subscriptions to our alumni publications, and you guys get one special benefit that no other alumni of the school get. You also get to join the DBLP Alumni Network. And this is both a virtual network, where we have events as well as WhatsApp group ongoing discussions on different specific topics with folks from all over the world and across all of the cohorts. We also have local chapters. And again, as local travel becomes more feasible, I'll look forward to doing things like this when I was in Singapore and meeting up in Anand's bar. Anand is a fintech entrepreneur, but he also has a little side project owning and running the best whiskey bar in Singapore. And so, of course, we had to gather there, some of the alumni and me when I was traveling through Singapore. Admissions process. I think this has all been covered for you guys. We do have the deadline of March 11th. If you've got any questions about that, your emeritus, your eruditus, contact person will be able to answer any questions on the admissions process. But I want to open it up to you guys. So it's 10 o'clock. We've got definitely 15 minutes. Gaurav, why don't you
Thank you.
tell me what are
Yes.
some of the questions that have been coming in?
Thank you so much, David, as always, for that lovely, insightful session. That you always give. It's great to see your passion for the program. So David, we do have a couple of questions. The one is from Nicola, who mentions that out of 5 domains of digital transformation in healthcare, which one would you focus first on?
So I would not prioritize one over the other without knowing your organization. So one of the things we'll do in the program is I'll give you a tool, which is a self-assessment tool that looks at the 5 domains. And it's really a sort of a mindset readiness tool. Where are you thinking? How does your organization currently think within each of these 5 domains? And what that's meant to do is to kind of help you identify relative strengths and weaknesses. So to me, that's the approach. It's not really defined by industry. It's certainly not that categorically, one is always more important than the other or something. They're all essential, but I do find in certain organizations that tend to be certain relative strengths and weaknesses. And so you want to know that and say, look, we particularly need to focus on really changing our approach to innovation, or we are really behind the curve in thinking about how we use data, or we are way too trapped in backward thinking about our value proposition. So you'll figure out through that and some other things in the program will help you figure out for your own organization, maybe all of them are important, but kind of which are particularly urgent for you. Oh, I meant to add, as you're getting the next question, one other thing. I love to keep in touch with students and folks on LinkedIn. So if you're active there, please, you can go ahead and just scan that QR code with your phone and find me there. I mentioned the research study on COVID and digital transformation. I just posted that on LinkedIn, so you can find that as well on my profile if you go there.
David, we have a question from Ruth.
Yes.
I'm a program manager for digital transformation for a 73-year-old logistics company. Last year, we rolled out updated business processes and new tools to our sales and operations departments. We've trained them and they're using the tools to they're using the tools, but there remains employees who are unwilling to embrace the new process and tools. How do we change employee behaviors or mindset to embrace the transformation?
Great question. Certainly logistics is like so many industries, an area which is going through tremendous change that has, if anything, just further accelerated in the last 12 months. And I'm not surprised. Again, the harder part is not figuring out how you're going to upgrade your IT stack, right? To figure out, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to build or deploy in order to adapt? Again, it's not trivial. It takes money, takes resources, takes time, but it's a relatively straightforward problem. The much trickier problem is, how do we deal with the organizational change? How do we bring people on board? How do we actually change the way people behave in their roles in different parts of the organization? And again, that's why one of the sort of 3 pillars of this whole program is an organizational change. And we'll see what are the real obstacles, a lot of sort of misunderstanding of why this change is hard. For example, I don't believe in this idea that companies are failing at digital transformation. And the reason is, if you look at companies that are doing it right, where you can really point to, oh, yes, that's a company, whether it's, New York Times or Walmart or Disney, where you can point to things they're doing and people say, oh, you're right. Yeah, that's a legacy company that's really doing, change significantly and driving real results through digital. Well, guess what? If you look back in the calendar a few years, you're going to see an organization that was completely flailing, that was trying to do this and seeing resistance and behaviors that wouldn't change and divisions inside the organization. So the companies that succeed, it's not something that's easy. It's not something typically that happens, right out the gate. It's why I talk about an iterative approach to organizational change. And the good news, though, is we now have lessons we can learn from the Times, from the Walmarts, from the cities, the Ford Motors, all these different companies, Air Liquide in France, industrial companies, consumer businesses, a wide range of different companies to see what were the bumps on the road, what were the wrong turns, how do you actually bring people along, and how do you drive change that is both top down and bottom up. And this is one of the critical things that we'll be talking about in the program.
Thank you, David. David, we have a question from Tony. Is it enough, this program, to scale up my company into the digital transformation? That's quite, it's quite open-ended, but I'm not sure, David, if you'd like to address.
It doesn't say what the company is.
Yeah.
No, you have to do the work. You will have to be right, but I mean, I'm assuming, Tony, that's what you're doing. You're obviously, your company, your team, yourself, you're going to be the ones who are going to drive that change and scale and grow your business. What this program will do is give you the tools kit, so to speak, in terms of strategy, in terms of organizational change, in terms of actual practical tools for doing things like problem opportunity identification, iterative validation of new business models to figure out which ones are actually going to work. So very tangible, practical tools, actually using them in things like your team projects, so not just learning about them, but applying them. So it's going to give you those tools as a leader of how you're going to make that happen. And then you're going to get the chance to do it. And again, one of the great things about not as we used to do in executive education in a prior era, if you had a big leadership program, the idea was you kind of go off into the woods for like 4 or 5 weeks, and you'd leave your phones behind, and you'd have trust falls and do kayaking in the morning and learn all day. And it was great, but it was kind of like leaving the world behind and then going back to your job. And what we found is actually more impactful is this kind of hybrid model where you go back and forth from sort of spurts of deep learning and work together in the class, whether it's live, virtual, or in person, and going back to a period when you're mostly working your job. You're still doing things like the team project and some of your on-demand learning and so forth, but you're kind of mostly back in the work mode, and then back and forth. And when you go back and forth, what's happening is you're bringing these ideas into that job, that challenge that Tony's facing, and you're putting them to work. And then you're coming back to the next class session and saying, hey, I've got a question about something we talked about, last month, and I've been trying to apply, and I want to understand, and that sort of back and forth, that sort of synthesis and kind of that ping-ponging from your own work to the class and back is really where we find the real impact happens.
Thank you, David. Actually, Tony clarified that he's got 2 startups. One is a pharmaceutical product company.
Okay.
The other one is an architecture company. So extremely, very diverse companies, actually.
Great. Yeah. So we have a lot of people who are building a business when they're in this program. Sometimes one of those people will bring in a part of that business, maybe a new product or something for it, pitch it as a class project. Other times they don't. They say, I know what I'm doing. I've got a team working on that. And what they find really valuable is to join another team project, someone else's idea, join that team, be a member, be able to sort of step outside all their suppositions about how they're running their own business, look at a totally new canvas, a new problem, work with a team of others on it, learn all these methods of lean startup and so forth, 4 stages of validation, growth navigator, et cetera. And then say, okay, now I see what I could be doing with my own startup, my own business.
Thanks, David. David, we have a participant, Kunle. He's done the certificate in digital strategies, and
Right.
and of
That's
course
one of my online programs. Yeah.
Yes. And how is this course different and for next generation leaders?
Sure. Hopefully you got a general sense from the walking through of the calendar elements. So compared with that program, my online program on digital strategies for business, you're going to see some certain themes some topics that I'll be speaking on. You'll say, oh, I remember the competitive value train. We'll look at some different cases. We'll apply it in different ways. You'll say, oh, yes, I remember this idea of customer networks. We're going to look at it in some different ways and different cases again here. But this program is a much bigger canvas. It's just bigger. It's a lot more program than that by intention and design. It's a lot more time over more months. It's more me. You're going to get a lot. As I said, I'm there every single day in the live classroom. You're going to get many, 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 many more hours of myself. So if I was my least favorite part of my previous program, maybe that's not a selling point, but that's a big difference. You get a lot more access to me and a lot more interactive time with me. The program is even more experiential because of these team projects in particular, and because of the personal case that you'll do. You get a wider range of Columbia Business School faculty. You don't get Rita McGrath and Oded Netzer and Adam Galinsky and all these others in that program. You get many more industry speakers. And this is, again, one of my favorite parts of this program. And these are people I've carefully chosen and people I've had before, so I know not just that they're doing good work, but bring them in. And really, typically, it's a conversation, a sort of a fireside chat format I'll have with them to really unearth some of their leadership lessons and take questions from all of you. And you also get the on campus, the immersion module, 6 days on campus, face-to-face, really a tremendous experience. So those, I would say, are some of the biggest differences between that program. Certainly, I wouldn't feel like if you've done that, you're going to feel that you're repeating a lot in this.
Thank you, David. So, David, I'm going to club 2 questions. One is from Santiago, and the other one is from Rashmi. Santiago's question is, a common challenge I've seen is how to bring the digital transformation journey to be to the board of directors. Is the challenge addressed in any way through the program? And Rashmi is, she works with IBM on the provider and the side, and she wanted to know if she could use the learnings in the program to advise her banking clients on how they're approaching digital transformation, to which the answer is yes. David, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the key sort of points of this when you think about leadership in organizational change is, how do you not just shift your own thinking, but how do you bring this to different audiences? How do you use this to articulate where you're going as a business in a way that is going to inspire and draw forth innovations, ideas, contributions, change ideas from every kind of level of the organization? How do you bring that to the board level? How do you go to top leadership, and whether it's in your own organization or in her case, to your clients? How do you tell a story? How do you explain? So we talk about, as I said, developing that unique, compelling why. One of the biggest mistakes I see in digital transformation efforts is there's no uniqueness to the story. So you come in and say, you must become digital in your bank or in your in industrial firm, your container shipping company. Why? Well, because Netflix, because Uber, because Amazon. You see the same cases as like everyone else. It's like, well, yes, but that's what I would call a generic case for change. So you need to figure out what is the unique and compelling case for change for not just even for your industry, but for this particular organization. Why does digital actually matter to you, to your customers, to your future, your competitive threats, et cetera, and your strengths and opportunities, your unique capabilities as an organization. And the other thing is that I find that case that's often made to boards and others is overly narrowly negative. And so we very often hear this case that is, sort of a negative urgency. Well, if you don't change, and it's all these kind of tales of disruption. And the problem is you can tell someone only so many times you're about to be disrupted by massive digital tidal wave, and they wake up the next morning and they still have a decent EBITDA and they're still making money and they haven't gotten fired before they just stop listening to you, right? It's the Chicken Little approach, or the boy who cried wolf. If you know that folk tale, I call it the boy who cried disruption. So what I have found is most effective is that when we are making the case for change as leaders, is you need to pair both the positive case and the negative case. So yes, you do want to talk about what are there are always risks of action. What we tend to psychologically overlook or underweight is the risks of inaction. And so you do want to talk about, but again, in a much more specific way. What are the specific risks? Where are venture capitalists throwing money in your industry right now? What does that show? What are they seeing as an opportunity that maybe you haven't seen? And then you also need, though, this is critical, the positive case for change. The only way you'll really motivate people is if you can talk to them, and this is, again, from the front line to the board, about what the opportunity is for value creation. Always lead with this. What are we actually going to do by becoming more digital that we've never been able to do before? What are the vistas for growth? What are the new market opportunities that are available to us? Again, to us in particular, based on our unique strengths and position in the market and so forth. And so defining that case for value, and it should be both value you're going to capture for the firm. You need sort of what I call a business case theory, how this is all going to pay for itself and more. But also to truly motivate, you want to look at that sort of extrinsic motivation where you look at, what is the difference at the end of the day this is going to make? How is this going to change the lives of your customers, even have an impact on your society? And that's the kind of thing that I see, speaking of financial services, companies like MasterCard, companies like Citi doing so effectively.
So David, I know we're kind of out of time, but would it be okay to take one or they're two mostly like statements, and there's one question. So this is Ruth. Hello,
yes.
Yeah. Hello, my husband and I own a consulting firm in Panama, targeting family businesses and companies with potential of growth. Not multinationals or enormous companies. We have more than 50 consultants on demand, depending on the need of our clients.
Mm-hmm.
Husband created a very interesting service, which cannot be patented in our country because it is a service. It would be very interesting to be able to offer it as something global. It has been very well accepted by our customers here. So I think this is more of, like an opportunity. It could be if they come to the program to present it.
Great.
To the cohort, to the peers, and use the cohort as a sounding board.
Yeah, so the personal case would be to look at, okay, how do we take this global? How do we take what's working, perhaps perhaps a little more face-to-face, hands-on kind of service with your local audience, and leverage a more digital business model to reach a broader audience and a more global one. And there's all kinds of, that's a great sort of growth story, and there's all kinds of challenges. And the key thing is, again, using this approach of validation to identify what are the assumptions you're making about how this would grow from a local business in Panama to a global business. How do you test those? How do you validate them? How do you make sure you've really identified the right customers for growth, not just some customers, but the segments of greatest priority, and that you're solving the right problems for them, because they may or may not be exactly the same problems as the SMEs that you're serving in Panama. So yes, all the kinds of work we're going to be doing in the program would be relevant, again, to apply a personal case to that business question.
Thank you, David. Another from Vincent, very similar question. I had innovation for a 187-year-old diversified conglomerate. So he will
What country is Winston's business in?
Winston's, could you share more insights on that?
I'm just curious. I love this 187-year-old diversified.
Yeah, we'll be taking the program to get smart on the frameworks and tools, but also look forward to working with Professor Rogers as a consultant to help us with the real work and all its complexities.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, I was talking with a company.
His company is Ayala in the Philippines.
Oh, yes. Terrific. Yeah. Ayala. So I was talking with your Central Global Head of Innovation just a couple of weeks ago. So and the remark I think might have been in that conversation was, well, we're an unusual company. McKinsey tells us we're very unusual because we're in all these different industries and they're seemingly unrelated. And I said, well, that's only unusual in North America and maybe Europe. I mean, whenever I'm in Asia or Latin America, that's the norm. You see these and talk about, one of the things that I'm really sort of big questions I'm focused on right now is complex organizations. You talk about change and obstacles to change and inertia. And what I've observed is these get harder and harder as organizations become more complex. And the sort of three factors that tend to define what I would call a complex organization are scale, which is really scale of number of people, right? If you can make a ton of money with 10 people, your organizational barriers are not nearly as hard as making the same amount of revenue each year with 10,000 people. So as you get into 10,000 or 50,000 or more people leads to complexity. More geographies leads to complexity, but particularly not just sort of market differences, language and customer behaviors and so forth and preferences, but also regulatory differences can be quite significant. And the third is, what Ayala and others face in most acute form, which is sort of business model diversity, being in different industries, having different lines of business. So as you get into organizations with different lines of business, serving different customers, perhaps in different geographies, more people, all of these organizational questions become really fascinating. They become very tricky. It's not that they're insurmountable. They just become more and more important. They become not sort of like the last thing, we'll come up with a great business model and then we'll kind of get people on board. You kind of got to start with that. Somebody asked me recently at an online forum I was teaching, they said, well, we're thinking about we're working on digital transformation, but how would you help us address, what do you do when culture shows up as a barrier to digital transformation? What do you do about that? And I said, well, don't think of culture as the barrier to digital transformation. Think of culture as the starting point, right? Your transformation is about a change of mindset and culture in your organization. So don't think of that as the pesky issue that's getting in the way. That's like right at the heart of what digital transformation is all about. So these are exactly the kind of questions that we get to delve into. And again, the fun of this program is, just as I talk about in terms of your approach to doing all of this has to be iterative to driving change in organization, to building a new business model. It's always iterative. Is that we take an iterative approach. We look at these questions, and then we come back to them, and then we come back to them, and we come back to them through a different lens and a different perspective and a different company, a different case and a different tool and a different industry guest speaker and a different experience you've had since we last talked about it. And each time we dig a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper. And that's really, for me, the fun of having this sort of big canvas over this time with all these different people, each bringing in different perspectives. And that's really the magic of this program and why I love teaching it.
Thank you so much, David. So we can, I don't know, David, if there's just one last question from Nicola. Right. Do you think that developing a mindset focused on digital transformation through the program could cause problems in relating to more traditional thinkers? So.
It depends. I guess it caused problems, but there was a phrase, James Clyburn, the recently deceased American civil rights leader and politician, would talk about the difference between trouble and good trouble. That's, I would say, good trouble. Yes, you're going to be a troublemaker. By the time you finish this program, you're not going to be just sitting back quietly, going along with the agenda, leaving the ship to keep sailing in the same direction until it, goes over a cliff into an ice floe or whatever. You're going to be one of those change agents, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks so much. David. Great questions. Yes. I know we could keep going, but that's what the program is. We have questions every day in the classroom. We start off with just open questions reflecting back on the day before. So we'll have lots of this.
Thank you very much, David, for taking out time and sharing detailed insights, addressing the questions for all the people who joined us today. Thanks to all our attendees from across the world who've taken out time to learn more about this program. We look forward to being in touch with you. We look forward to welcoming you to the program. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to your learning advisors. You would have also seen my email address on your Zoom webinar invite. So please send in your questions to me in case there are any questions which went unanswered. Thank you again, David. David, I'm not sure if you have any closing comments before we close this webinar.
I just, thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks for your terrific questions. I am really looking forward to kicking this next run of the program off in April and finding just the amazing folks who are going to show up as they do every time we run this. And I hope to see many of you there.
Perfect. Thank you very much, David. And thank you again to all our attendees. And thanks, Dheeraj, for managing the platform today. Thank you.